Hey everybody, it is Mr. George, and today I'm going to put together a video for you on the European Middle Ages, which falls within our post-classical civilization unit. So before we get into some specifics, I wanted to provide an overview of the entire time period. So this time period is around 1,000 years. So it really begins after we have the fall of Rome, the western half of the Roman Empire, okay? And it really will end up concluding around 1453, which becomes the end of the Hundred Years' War between England and France. So when we look at this time period, just understand that from 476 on to the right here, we really have the rise of Christianity, the power of the Catholic Church. Okay? And what's going to happen is Islam is going to come in at the beginning of the post-classical period, and we're also going to see simultaneously the expansion of Islam and the rise of Islam. So we're having the rise of Christianity, the rise of Islam, and what's going to happen when we get to 1095 is where we get the Crusades. Okay? That's where we get the Crusades. So in Europe, in the first part of the Middle Ages is often referred to as the Dark Ages. So we've got lots of violence, we've got lots of death, we've got loss of learning. Again, it's literally like the lights have gone out in Europe. And there are other civilizations that are thriving at this time. For example, in China, for example, in Islam, as we see the expansion. So really, it's kind of lights out for a little bit, and this period of time gets referred to as the Dark Ages. Now, as a result of these outside invaders, so in Europe, we've got the Vikings coming from the north, the Magyars from the east, we've got the Muslims from the south. They're coming up up towards Europe. They've also crossed over into Spain. So as a result of that, we now see this age of feudalism, feudal society, and we'll look at an example of that. Now, we're also seeing this time period referred to as the Age of Faith, which really begins as we see Charlemagne being coronated as the emperor, as we see the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire under Otto in 900, and specifically in 1095 when the Crusades begin. The Crusades really demonstrate the power and influence of not just the Pope, but of the Roman Catholic Church. Also around 1000 is when we start to see, I guess within this time period, a golden age, which is referred to as the Commercial Revolution. So really the Crusades kind of jumpstarts this time period where we do start to see all sorts of activity as far as people moving to the cities, as far as trade networks, and we see improvements. So the lights have been turned on in Europe. Unfortunately, it's going to be halted with the Golden Age because as a result of this trading, we're going to see the plague come to Europe through these trading networks. And that's around 1320, 1340, and that's going to make its way through Europe, where about 1/3 of Europe will die. And also we'll start to see the decline of the church for several different reasons, and we'll look at that within a separate video when we talk about the Crusades. People losing their faith, priests refusing to provide last rites for people who are dying, people praying to God and God not answering as far as saving people through the plague. And then we also will see some nonsense within the church when the French king moves the papacy to France, and then we have the great schism that takes place 1378 to 1414, where we have not one, not two, but three popes. So it kind of becomes a little chaotic people start to kind of see their doubts, their questioning. And when we say the questioning, it's really kind of leading us towards the beginning of the Renaissance, which really becomes a period of like questioning and challenging authority in certain organizations. So this kind of gives us a nice timeline of everything. Let's go through some specifics here. First, when we talk about feudalism, it's a way where people have responsibilities. Everybody gives something, and everyone gets something. So the kings provide land to people, to lords. In exchange for that, the lords provide loyalty, which also means they're providing food, they're providing military protection. On these manors or fiefs that we have different individuals that are also providing services and getting something. So we have these knights that are providing military support and protection. In exchange, they're getting a place to stay. They're also getting and they're getting food. We have the peasants and serfs that are getting a place to live. In exchange for that, they're also providing food, and the knights are providing security for them. Within this feudal society, we have lots of places are isolated. They're not interacting. They're not traveling. They're pretty much living in isolation for fear of these outside groups. Remember, we have the Vikings that are attacking. We've got the Magyars that are attacking, and we have the Muslims that are also expanding. So we have all these different groups. Europe is really under siege, and feudalism becomes a solution to managing, because we no longer have a central government in Rome. We no longer have this one central government with one professional Roman military. The Roman Empire has fragmented, is broken up, and we have lots of different kingdoms that are now starting to rise and form in Europe. So within the Middle Ages, the church has lots of power and authority, because these are the ones who are able to read. So they're also the gatekeepers to knowledge. With some of the problems that they have is that we now start to see that some of them are actually not complying with these duties that they have, and they're going against these church teachings. So two terms that come up is simony, which is the practice of bishops selling positions in the church, and also lay investiture, which is the practice of kings appointing bishops. So as these kings and popes are now looking at power, they're starting to kind of encroach on each other. So as a result, church is constantly trying to like reform, and we start to see again the kings and the popes who are really trying to manage their own authority. Another term that comes up is a tithe. Some people still refer to those today as a tithe, as the money that you're giving to the church. Okay. Remember, within feudal society, even though we have different social groups within that pyramid, the one common force, common bond bringing everyone together really is the Roman Catholic Church. Okay. And during this time period, we not only have like new religious orders, but we have, we've got individuals giving up all their worldly possessions and becoming monks, and within monasteries. And these are the ones who are like doing a lot of like the writing. You start to see women becoming nuns in convents. We also start to see the church construction, and the churches tended to be central to communities on feudal manors. As we start to see cities, it becomes the center of civilization. The style begins to kind of change from this Romanesque style that are rounder to the more Gothic, where the spires tend to seem to go all the way into the sky. So here's an example of a Romanesque church. You see it's much shorter, flatter. And then we have these Gothic cathedrals that have this, tend to be darker, tall spires, tend to have flying buttresses coming out, stained glass. Okay, what's also happening this time period is we're seeing the growth and development of two areas that are becoming countries with England and France. So really, it begins in 1066 when William the Conqueror, who was the Duke of Normandy at this time, that had Viking heritage, actually ends up conquering England and uniting England as one instead of these separate kingdoms that they had prior to that. And as we move into England, we start to see these monarchies that are now coexisting with the Crusades, which again I'll talk about in a prior video. Something other that's significant is that we're going to talk about King John and the Magna Carta. Okay, so this is significant because the Magna Carta was in 1215. This is when we have, for the first time, the nobles or these individuals, landowners that rise up and say, hey, you know what? We need you to also follow the rules. Okay, we're going to have laws and we need you to be able to obey those laws just like we do. So the Magna Carta really becomes a really important document, especially as we kind of move into the in the development of England with the Bill of Rights. You'll see that it really means protections for people that will continue to expand. So again, that was in 1215 in England, the Magna Carta. And now what you're also seeing at this time is the rise of France. Okay, so we start to see these dynasties that are now transforming with like lots of power, and the kings are really looking to increase their power. So even though England looks like it's spreading more democracy, French still has much more central authority with their kings. So the Carolingian dynasty ends up migrating to the Capetian dynasty. And then we start to see this line of Philips, okay, where strong armies, and they're each aligning themselves with the church. And Philip IV really does this when he decides to move the papacy from Rome to Avignon, France. So we have this kind of sets the stage in France, which has different social groups referred to as estates. But the Third Estate really never had the power to kind of like check on the authority of France. So what happens is at this point, these two rising powers end up fighting for over 100 years, and this becomes the 100 Years' War. 100 Years' War, which out of the 100 Years' War, we have an important individual who's a young teenage girl who is Joan of Arc. And then as we kind of get to the close of the 100 Years' War, the results of this is that we really do see, again, the 100 Years' War was a fight over the French throne. And as a result, the English were not successful. And what happens is they both end up feeling much more nationalism and pride within each of their countries. And then now fighting for the king, not just fighting for their own feudal lords. And now we're going to start to see some internal problems within those countries as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video on the European Middle Ages, and thank you for watching.